Welcome back. We hope everyone had an enjoyable Christmas and is looking forward to a fantastic new year. Recently I went up to visit two of our most loyal followers, my Aunt Catherine and Uncle Tommy in Perryopolis, Pennsylvania. And anytime I make those treks, I look around to see if there's anything up in these areas that I can't live without. And I did come across a couple of things that I did purchase and bring back with me. Some of you know that I do collect O-Series steel chainsaws, among a lot of other things. And I was able to purchase this 08S saw. This is an excellent example of an old vintage steel saw. It is the second smallest saw that Steel made, and I'm very happy to own it. Now, this is the largest saw that Steel ever made. This is an 090. It's a G version, which means it's gear driven. It was primarily used in milling operations, but I'm going to be putting it to work cutting regular wood. It does run fantastic, but it needs a couple of things. I need to reroute the fuel line, and this handle on here is not the original one. Someone made this, so I will be putting the correct handle on it as well. And don't let this short bar fool you. This thing is a monster. So I will be putting it to work once I get a 36 or 42 inch bar on it. The piece that I was most excited to bring back was something that my uncle sent me home with. This is a control valve wheel for the lock chambers on the upper portion of the Mississippi River in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was used for Lock 4 to control the gates that allowed the water in and out so ships could pass through at different grades. My uncle said this was put into service around 1928, where it was continued to be used until the early 80s when it was replaced with a hydraulic unit. What's really interesting to note about this wheel is that the entire piece is brass with the exception of the center, which is cast. So I haven't decided yet if I'm going to pull it completely apart to strip it and polish it, or if I'm going to just strip it and polish it as it is. But either way, very soon it's going to be end up displayed in my home, and I can't be happier to own this. So now let's see what the students are actually working on. Thanks for tuning in.
One of the first steps is to get the accessory belt and alternator out of the way. Then with the throttle body removed and the bolts out of the intake, they will remove the upper and lower intake assembly. This is where the gasket was leaking. As you can see, the coolant staining around it. Here the students are chemically cleaning the mating surfaces at the head. Since it came with the kit anyway, the students are replacing the gasket between the upper and lower intake. With the new gasket in place, the students are torquing the two together. With the new gaskets in place, the intake goes back into position. Here the students are installing the remaining studs for the passenger side, and they're chasing the threads on the block on the driver's side.
With our new studs put in the passenger side of the Duramax and our ARP fastener lubricant, we're ready to torque the head down. I'm coating the washers with the ARP lubricant along with the nuts themselves before installing them onto the studs.
I'm also adding a liberal amount inside the nut so it coats the threads as it's going on.
The factory bolts for the Duramax are set up to do a small torque spec and then plus 60 degrees and then another 60 degrees. But with the ARP studs, they recommend simply doing the 3 steps that you would normally use to torque the head down, but up to 125 pound-feet, and that's all that's necessary. I did the first set at 45, now I'm doing the second series at 90, and then we'll finish it up at 125. I'm doing it from the front because I want to have a nice even pull. It's a lot easier and more comfortable to pull this direction smoothly than it is to try to do it from the side. I'm going to hold this firm, pull nice and slow, wait for the click, and then we're at 90. And then we'll move on to the next ones, doing these in order, in kind of a clockwise, working from the inside out, and then again we'll do it to 125, and that'll finish us off. I want to explain to you why it's important to use that lubricant. As we have the stud in place and we have our washer and then we have the nut with the flange, as these two go together and we're turning them against each other, there's friction between the washer and the flange on the nut. There's also friction on the threads themselves, and all that can be measured and felt within the torque wrench setting. So by having a lubricant there, we are getting a more accurate torque spec to 125 pound-feet of torque and compression on the cylinder head. If we didn't do that, we may only have it maybe 122, 123, maybe even less than that. But the point of it is that the specification is 125. It doesn't say plus or minus 2 or 3. It says 125. So by having that lubricant in there, that will allow it to get to, it gets rid of the stiction and allows it to compress the gasket correctly with the proper amount of pound-foot of torque.
With the new bearing in place, the students put the rod cap back onto the number 5 connecting rod. Do the other one again. There you go. The torque spec for these rod nuts calls for an additional 55 degrees of rotation. We're using a torque angle gauge to achieve that. Did you make it?
Yes.
Sure?
I think a little more.
Good.
Unfortunately, I didn't have the camera here the day that I put the Suburban back together over break, but more importantly, it did not fix our problem. So I'm not certain what's going on, maybe a cracked piston skirt or a piston pin boss, but I do have another Suburban with the same engine in it that I may have the students change out. I'm not sure yet. I'm going to think about that, but if I do, we're going to pull this engine apart and find out exactly what that problem is, but I'll keep you posted on what my decision is.
Next time on Bulldog Builds, we'll have more work done on that Duramax diesel engine. We'll get the intake back on our F-150, and we'll get some more work done on the Z1R Kawasaki. See you next week.